Sitting here with David Turpak, aka David the Dog Trainer, and this is Rapid Fire Questions.
Here we are.
David, is treat training bribery?
Depends on the context. Treat training can be bribery when used incorrectly. That is why we always make sure whatever it is we're doing, if we're in the teaching stages, we could utilize treats, and we're essentially trying to bribe the dog into getting them to do what it is that we want them to do. That's the purpose of training with treats, the teaching process. As we move into the proofing stages and as we're working around distractions, if say your dog is distracted by A, B, C, or D thing going on in the environment and your dog is not paying attention to you, so you take treats out to then try to focus your dog on you, in my opinion, you start getting into the realms of bribery at that point. I know a lot of people will differ with that. A lot of people will try to say things like, oh, well, you're training in a new environment or you're training around new distractions, which isn't completely incorrect, but at that point, in the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you're going to run into situations where your dog is more motivated by things going on around them, and you need to make sure that they're going to be compliant one way or another. So it's a fine line you got to play on. We love food. We love utilizing food in the process, but we also do need to maintain that respect, and there's something to be said about having that from your dog so that whether you have those treats or not, you're going to be able to get the compliance that you need out of them.
So would you say that the squirrel is always better than the biscuit?
Sometimes.
Okay. All right. What is the funniest, most memorable, most unique client misunderstanding about dogs?
All your typical dog training do's and don'ts online as far as, telling the dog it's okay when they're scared of things or how to socialize your dog properly or this or that, like all those basic things that most owners will think of, like what their dog is actually thinking when they're not actually thinking. So any way you're humanizing the dog basically is kind of a misunderstanding from the client's part. As far as a specific example, honestly, like one of the most ridiculous things that I ever heard, and I don't even know if this answer, I don't fully understand the question still, right? But one of the most ridiculous things, I remember there was a household we worked with briefly for they had 6 dogs, and it was just Love Fest 9,000. And I think it's just the idea that we could just add dogs repeatedly and keep adding more dogs into the house, and all we have to do is smother them with affection and cuddles and kisses all the time, and that's all that will make them happy. And what happened is it wound up turning into a bloodbath for them of fights with these dogs all the time, and just they were not able to comprehend how they were creating those issues, and it was just a hot mess. So misunderstanding being a lot of people not understanding as you add dogs into your pack that love and affection is not going to solve those problems.
Which goes into my next question. If you had to pick one, you've just went through a few. What is the number one most common dog behavior caused by owners?
Separation anxiety. Most people get dogs to fill an emotional gap that they have, I feel like, which is great, right? We all need that support in our lives, and we all get something emotionally out of our dogs. The problem is the more intense that gap is that you're trying to fill with your dog, the more you're going to project these emotions onto a dog that can't necessarily handle that, and the more that is going to create problems and neurotic behavior in dogs. I would say that's the number one. Then you can get into dog reactivity is the close second of the number one behavioral issue that we have that comes in, but I don't think that one is so much owner created. There are things owners will do like dog introductions on leash and stuff like that will kind of create it, but I think some dogs are more or less likely to being reactive than others. I think separation anxiety is the number one.
What is the most challenging, in your experience, canine behavioral issue to overcome?
Dog reactivity.
Dog
reactivity, because it's so nuanced and it requires you to look at everything, not just the reactivity, and it requires you to look at how do I leverage consequences in other areas of the dog's life or impulse control in other areas of the dog's life first, and then how do I strategically work through the dog reactivity and play that long game as far as slowly starting to work through those issues. Then you can get into the other obvious ones like dog aggression or human aggression, which the reason why those ones would be more challenging than others is because there's not necessarily a fix to it like there is with some of the other behavioral issues, right? Because in the end of the day, aggression or quote unquote the intent to do harm is something that is managed long term, not fixed. It doesn't just go away because it's to some degree always ingrained in the dog. You could always make it better, but it doesn't completely go away, which makes it very challenging to manage long term as a behavioral issue. But reactivity is still to this day the number one behavioral issue that we have come in because people don't understand it. People don't understand that it's more complicated than they think as far as working through it, and most people have a very hard time understanding and reading their dog to be able to be effective with it.
What was your least enjoyable moment as a professional dog trainer?
This is actually a good question. Least enjoyable, there's not a specific one because in this industry, because it is such a nuanced industry and because you're working with all sorts of different type of people, and it's not a product that you're selling, right? It's not a I give you this, you give me this kind of thing that's black and white and cut and dry. And also it's not like a lot of other services that are provided, like, I don't know, guitar lessons or cooking lessons or golf lessons, because I'm taking them now, or whatever it is, because there's so much more emotion attached to it, because the things that we're trying to help them with, there's a window of success that's contingent on the owner, right? Where just like all of those other things, not every person that goes to a cooking chef is going to turn into the next Emeril Lagasse, right? Or not every person that goes and takes golf lessons is going to turn into the next Tiger Woods. And because those things are seen as hobbies in the world, the failures don't matter, right? If you don't become that, in the end of the day, you're going to chuck it to the side and find a new hobby. Where most of the people that are coming in for lessons, like, some people are not cut out to be the best trainers in the world, and we need to figure out a way to find even the slightest bit of success with them. But because it's a service and because it's contingent on the person, there's failures that are involved in that as well, right? And especially when it comes to more serious things like dogs biting people or dogs getting in fights with other dogs or things like that, those are very, very hard when you know that they're counting on you to help them with it, but you can't give that guarantee you're going to be able to help them with it still, right? And you're going to try your hardest and you put your all into it. And especially with some of these people who they're really trying, they really do care, but they still might not have all the pieces of the recipe, in order to get what they're really looking for out of it. So I would say that's the hardest part about the job overall. This gets into the exact opposite of the last thing we talked about. So I don't know if it's necessarily the most rewarding specific thing, but when we get those really serious cases of dogs that are on the brink of being euthanized, right, or owners that are getting ready to get rid of their dog or whatever it may be, and we're able to find that breakthrough and we're able to find that success with them, then you could get into the more egotistical, rewarding aspects of when you start gaining notoriety and you start really understanding that you are making an impact. Like the first couple of times I was asked to speak at seminars or give different lectures to other companies out there that hired me for my expertise and stuff, and knowing that I can make a broader impact in the whole industry, not just in my little sector of miracle canine training. Like, that's very rewarding and a proud moment of mine as well, I would say, is when I started seeing a lot of that kind of stuff happen.
Yeah, and through social media and stuff like that too, it's nice to throw that exponent on there. You're in your sector, but you're also reaching many at the same time. It's pretty cool. So how do you continually educate yourself and stay current and ahead of the industry? And at this point, are you running out of resources?
That's a funny one. Okay, so I would say as far as constant education is concerned, we've talked about this before, I think on the podcast, like one of the first times you came on the podcast. It's not, I think you hit a certain point where the dog training side of things becomes kind of black and white, right? If you take 50 dog trainers and you look at all the similarities amongst them, a very large percentage of things are going to be very similar minded, right? What you start looking into is how to reach more people and be more efficient with how you're getting your point across to people. So I am constantly looking for how things are articulated to people through outside platforms. Now, it's hard to see everything going on in the dog training world, obviously, but I constantly have a watch on everything that's going on in the greater Northeast Ohio area, how people are doing the things that they do, how I stay ahead of making adjustments not only to the training we're providing, but also the services we're providing, how we can continue to grow the company past what a lot of other places are doing, and start to look for things that I like and things I don't like. And that's just how I created my training program in general, right? when I created our training program that we utilize here, I went through and I took this person's program and tried it. And I took this person's program and tried it. And then this person's and tried it. And I started finding I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this. And you piece it all together and you continue to evolve and grow, right? I can do the same thing not only now from a training standpoint of what other people are doing and other services that they're providing, but also how they're running their business. I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this, right? And as I get more pieces like that, I think that because I'm so aware of that kind of stuff, I think I'm able to continue to grow past what a lot of other places are able to grow as. And we get a lot of that feedback from clients who have been to this trainer and been to this trainer and done this and tried this program and stuff like that, and things they liked and didn't like, because that's the best feedback you can get, right? If I have Joe Schmo that went over to Joe Schmo dog trainer over here and said, you know, we learned a lot about this, but I just didn't feel like I was getting answers with this and this, and I start noticing that as a similarity amongst person to person, I know that more emphasis in the industry needs to go on that. As far as losing track of resources, I think the hard part is finding the time to continue diving into new resources, right? So I could be aware of all those types of things, but I don't necessarily study it like I used to, I would say. And at this point, I try to block out time twice a year, stuff like that, really to make sure that I'm diving into new things that are popping up in the industry to try to stay ahead of that stuff.
But aside from that formal time that you carve out for yourself, you just basically are going through life forever with the mindset of a good student. We talked about that on the podcast. And we're always listening and we're always open to new ideas, and we always take these new things seriously and think about them, think them through.
Yeah.
Always list them.
And one of my favorite things, just on that point one more time, is like when we had Bridget on the podcast, and she, you know, a lot of our trainers here, obviously because they're kind of in that young growing phase of training, they're constantly finding the education, and then I'm getting it almost secondhand from them, which I like because, you know, I don't want to say they're looking at me as a mentor, but they're working here, obviously, so they're looking for guidance on the stuff that they're reading. And I need to be able to look at that stuff not from a biased view of, that's not us, don't look at it, but like, is this actually good pieces of information or not good pieces of information, and how do I then articulate it to them in a way that gives my honest opinion on that kind of stuff. So I think that really helps me as well to continue to stay up to date and current on things. I mean, a lot of these TikTok trends, right, that Bridget and I talked about, like I wasn't aware of a lot of those things because I'm not on there, right? So, okay, cool. I start seeing similarities in a lot of the enrichment work and a lot of the counter conditioning work, and I'm able to kind of carve out my opinions on those things then as I become more aware of that.
So yeah, you know, as far as always listening and whatnot, taking new ideas and new points of view seriously. This question is actually inspired by force-free TikTok. You know, we're always listening. You know, I'll think about, even though I don't agree with it, I'll think about it. But with that being said, what place does play have, if any, in obedience training?
Are you talking play from the standpoint of like playing with the dog?
Motivation.
Oh, yeah, sure. Right. So play and utilizing toys and stuff as rewards and things like that was a very commonly used thing in the sport world, right? So when I was involved in Mondio Ring and like other competitive dog sports and stuff like that, a lot of these dogs, as they mature, right? So German Shepherds, Malinois, high drive breeds, their play drive or their drive for toys as they get older tends to get more intense than their food drive, right? And that's just a lot of the way a lot of these dogs are designed. So because of that, if you look at that being a higher value resource, you're going to be able to motivate a dog to do things much better. Now, the problem is when you get into teaching stages where you're shaping precise behaviors and teaching things the dog doesn't know, play is not something that can be used as specifically to target and isolate. I'm rewarding this, I'm rewarding this, I'm rewarding this, I'm rewarding this. So when people use it before everything is fully trained, or before the dog has at least a general understanding of a lot of this kind of stuff, things can get sloppy really quick, right? I also think a lot of common issues that owners have with their dogs stem from too much arousal. So I don't want to create these huge, exciting moments and stuff through that play if we don't necessarily have to. Now, here's the thing. Once your training is complete with your dog and you're in the backyard playing ball with them or playing tug with them, you absolutely want to incorporate that into utilizing your obedience commands and stuff because, one, it's practicing impulse control from the state of if you're putting your dog into this really high drive predatory state of mind over tug or balls and stuff, you need to make sure that you have control over that as well. So you could utilize that obedience to then gain some control back from the play, right? But in addition to that, it could give you a fun way to continue stimulating your dog's brain. When I play Chuck It with Vinny outside in the yard, right, I'm incorporating downstays and him waiting for the ball and this and that. And not only does that make the play more enjoyable because it's more controlled, but it also makes those commands stronger because he's utilizing those and working for that game that we're playing. So I think it's really important. I just think a lot of these types of things, these types of trends that we're seeing nowadays aren't really solving the problems. They're more supplements that you add in later on. I keep saying that play and enrichment and all these kind of things are fantastic, but they're supplements to be able to provide your dog a better quality of life once you have control over them. In my opinion, they're not means to stop behavioral issues. And some trainers that get too overboard on it, I'll name drop Larry Crone as one of them, right? I love Larry and I love the work he does and I love the fight that he's fighting with things. But a lot of the videos you'll see of him playing with these dogs is full of, because he's trying to get them so motivated for that toy, these dogs jumping all over him and, not under control because they're trying to nab that ball out of his hands and stuff like that. And I don't think that's a healthy state of mind for a dog to be in, because what if your daughter goes out to play with the dog and the dog doesn't understand those firm consequences for doing those types of behaviors? Well, then you got somebody getting knocked over and jumping for a ball and biting at it and accidentally catching a hand or this or that. And I think unless you have the control established first, things like that can get slightly more dangerous depending on the situation.
So you'd probably say it'd be more similar to positive reinforcement, much better in the, not as the initial order, but as a smoothing out process, considering, I guess, whatever unique dog you're working with.
Well, play is slightly different with that because, listen, if you're just teaching and you're in the early training stages and you want to use food rewards and stuff, that's going to be fine because, like I said, you could shape those precise things and be more specific with your food rewards. Play, you can't necessarily, you probably could, but it's going to be more difficult for you to train the dog from nothing to something with just a toy than it is with food because it's just too stimulating. There's too much energy and stuff involved in it. You can't get the repetitions in as fast and stuff. So play is one I would add in later. Positive reinforcement or food training, you could add in initially, but you got to transition to gaining that control after, utilizing negative reinforcement, aversives, things like that.
All right. What about you are people most surprised or shocked to learn?
Are you talking a personal level or a dog training level?
Let's go non-dog training.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That I am the least social person you'll meet from the standpoint of I've got about 6 friends that I hang out with, and half of the time when I'm hanging out with them, I'm not talking. I'm just every now and then providing pieces of information into the conversation. But I like being around things and a part of things without needing to interact that much. That thing, and I have very few hobbies outside of dogs.
That intro extrovert.
Yeah. Honestly, like that, I'm not an extroverted person. Like I exhaust all of that here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself professionally in 5 years?
Continuing to grow an empire.
There you have it.
I mean, we're like, this isn't stopping, right? Like we've been doing this now since 2016, 20, I think 2014 I've been doing this since. So 2.5, 5.5. I've been doing this for almost 6 years now for myself, so with my own company, and we have continued playing the growing, evolving, and changing, and I have no interest in stopping that. This year has been fantastic for us. Last year was fantastic for us. We have a lot of growth projected for this year, and I have a lot of opportunities I want to continue providing the staff, and I want to create some really fantastic services to offer people, and I want to create some really, really fantastic careers for people, and that's the goal. Is that it? Is that the last question? So I think that's it. So this was a rapid fire question. Hope you guys like it.